Hello, I'm Ken Andrews, Music Director for the Orchestra of Northern New York, and thank you for joining me for Tuesday Talks with a Maestro. Today, my very special guest is Jill Rubio, Principal Flute and Personnel Manager for the Orchestra of Northern New York. She's also an Adjunct Professor at the Crane School of Music and is the Band Director for Potsdam High School, an amazing set of responsibilities. Her varied bio is available on our website, ONNY.org, and I hope you will please go to that and see what wonderful things she's been doing in her career. Jill, I'd like to start with a couple of basic questions about the early years when you were starting. Was flute the first instrument that you actually took up?
Well, it's the first wind instrument that I took up. I had some piano lessons when I was in kindergarten, but they didn't last very long because I just memorized the music and they didn't know what to do with that. And in elementary school, I went to a little private school, a little Catholic school, and I learned guitar to play with the guitar masses with the nuns. But that was it until a little bit later. When it was the summer after 8th grade, my big brother took me to a rock concert. It was actually my first rock concert. It was the British band Jethro Tull.
Oh my goodness.
And I came home from that so excited, and I begged my mom for a flute, and she was nice enough to get me one. And so that whole summer, I spent just playing and playing and playing and learning things by ear. I didn't have lessons at that point, and I haven't stopped ever since. I love to play.
That's incredible. So you actually took lessons through a band program. Did you also take privately during that time?
I had a few music store lessons, very basic. And in California, I lived in the Los Angeles area, public school system. We didn't have lessons as part of our curriculum. We had band every morning, first thing in the morning. So I started band in 9th grade and just went from there. And then I auditioned at the University of Southern California School of Music. And I got in as a composition major, but I was in their bands. And a year later, I switched to flute performance because that's what I really wanted to be doing.
At what point in your life did you really decide you wanted to pursue a career in music?
Probably during high school. That was my passion. I mean, I was in all the musical offerings at my school, and I played saxophone in the jazz band, and I loved to improvise, and I played in pit orchestras, and every opportunity I could get.
I love the comment about Jethro Tull because I think every kid at that time was humming or playing or singing those tunes. They were just great. What a great inspiration to start the instrument. Many people might find it interesting that there are different positions in a wind section. We have a principal, we have a second, sometimes we have a third, sometimes we have an extra instrument like piccolo or English horn, something else. And I think sometimes people have the idea that, oh, you either sit first because one sits above the other, but they each have different roles. And I'm curious, how do you view the job as principal as opposed to what happens in these other roles?
Well, I mean, each is integral to the whole. In an orchestra, we've got a lot of chamber ensembles, right? We've got our wind section and our brass section, percussion and string sections. The second flute has to be a chameleon, has to be able to perfectly match the expression and the sound of the first flute, whatever the first flute is doing. And I've played that position, and it's really interesting and really fun. And the balance is very important. The second flute actually plays louder than the first a lot of the time because the lower sounds are, very important to the blend of the orchestra. Principal instruments are more responsible, well, not more, but very responsible to the interpretation that the conductor is sharing with them.
And the other principals.
And the other principals, yeah. I mean, we're always listening to each other for the blend and, of course, the intonation, and knowing who's got the main line and who is accompanying whom. So we're always communicating just with our music, which is really exciting.
It's very interesting, isn't it, that when we think about second instrument, second horn, second flute, second oboe, whatever, that many times they have to be such great musicians that they can sound like someone else. I know both of us have always said to our students that if you want to be principal, then do that position. But if you want to be second or third, you have to really meld to that other player. That's great. I'm just curious. Some people might be interested. I know you do a lot of solo playing, a lot of chamber playing in different types of music and musical backgrounds, as well as orchestral playing. Do you have a favorite? And also, I'm just curious. How do you see the chamber music as affecting what you do in the orchestra? Well,
it would definitely. They're all crossovers, and as we said, the chamber, the orchestra is a collection of chamber groups. So we're always thinking in terms of small as well as the larger global group. I play in a duo with my husband, the Rubio duo with flute and classical guitar. That's how we met, 36 years ago. And so we've got our repertoire that we play, and it's really fun. And we're playing a concert tonight, in fact, a virtual concert. But I really love playing in the orchestra, especially this orchestra, because of the people, and also because we get to play repertoire that flutists don't usually get to play. We don't normally get to play a lot of Brahms or Rimsky-Korsakov, or, we have a certain repertoire, every instrument does, but the orchestral repertoire is so much wider. It's really exciting.
Yeah. I'm curious, you do so many things, you wear so many hats between principal flute and personnel manager, and as well as your job, full-time job at Potsdam High School. And I must say to our listeners that she's an amazing, amazing director of this and such a great mentor to these young kids. The students in this area are so fortunate to have such a great set of music educators that we have around us, and Jill is one of those people. But I'm curious, with all of that you do, and with your family as well, and your time not only with Doug in terms of the duo, but also as a family, how do you find the difficulty in balancing all of this?
It's been mainly pretty good. There are a few times when everything is coming to a head at the same time, when I feel a little scatterbrained. But mostly, it's just a matter of staying organized. And as a musician, I always have to make sure that I get in my amount of practice so that things stay in shape and I can sound good when I want to.
If I remember, you told me once, when do you usually make sure you start practicing? What is your time when you start?
Well, during the school year, I get up very early. I get up early all the time anyway now, but I get up about 4:45 and I walk the dogs, and then I get in 45 minutes of practice or so before I get to work. And then I get home from work, and sometime during the evening before I go to bed around 9, I practice for another hour.
Great. I'm curious, I'm sure maybe some of our listeners might be curious about your role as principal flute versus the personnel manager position. Do you find there's conflicts between this? How do you find blending these two positions?
They blend pretty well because personnel manager obviously knows all of the musicians, at least to some degree, and that's not only very pleasant, but I think it kind of feeds me musically. I love finding out what other people have been doing musically, and makes me think of some things that I might be able to do. It sometimes is a challenge when I have to hand out contracts or checks or something right before we perform, and I would like to be sitting down and warming up slowly, but that's where being prepared in advance makes a difference.
I think our listeners might be curious, what do you see as the relationship between the personnel manager and the music director?
Well, you and I have to communicate pretty closely as far as how many people need to be hired for each section, specific people that we want to hire. In our case, where we live, we're not very close to any major cities, so transportation costs become an issue. So once we have hired all of the local musicians who are at the level we need, we have to start thinking about who we'll bring in. And so that's a decision you and I make together. And sometimes you've given me your suggestions and I've tried them all and they're not available. Then I start going by other suggestions I get from people we trust.
Yeah, and I have to say that Jill is one of the main pillars of this organization, because she irons out all the problems. She's really a problem solver, she doesn't just hire musicians, she's the problem solver for the organization. She makes sure that we can have rehearsals and concerts. Without that, we would have nothing. I'm just curious, with a little time we have left, do you have any favorite composers that you like to work on in the orchestra? I know it's always a tough question because there's so many great ones.
There sure are. Well, I mean, I mentioned Brahms and Rimsky-Korsakov. I think of Scheherazade. Gosh, some of the favorite things that I've gotten to play with the orchestra when we did the entire Planets suite by Gustav Holst a few years ago, a flute section of 4 of us, or were there 5? It was a lot of people, and it was wonderful. We've done wonderful suites by Aaron Copland. We did Mozart's 40th Symphony. That's a piece near and dear to my heart. Gosh, there's so much.
Yeah, it's always hard to pick that. And lastly, I'd like to ask, are there any special moments, whether that be a particular concert or just a memory that you have that sticks out in your mind? After so many years with the orchestra, there are a lot of them for all of us, but are there one or two that you find interesting?
Goodness. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, where we filled up Hosmer Hall and also our venue in Watertown with a big choir and so many people coming to listen. That was really exciting, and the music, it sounded so good. The times I've gotten to play concertos with the orchestra, the one that Paul Siskind wrote for me,
I was just going to say, it's one of my
really
favorite
cool.
times.
It was really fun. So, and the other times I've gotten to play concertos like the Brandenburg Fourth Concerto, playing second to you.
Well, that was a special moment for me. Anytime I get to play with you as a musician is always special. I wish we're going to have another chance down the road, I hope, to speak about other aspects of the way you feel about music and the orchestra, and I look forward to that. I urge all of you to look onto the ONNY site, onny.org, and look into our bios and under Principal Flute and look and see the wonderful things that Jill Rubio is doing. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and we'll be back again next week with another program of Tuesday Talks with the Maestro. Thank you.